This is CBC Vancouver News.
So you've got way more people, way more trains. You know, it's particles in a jar. Something's going to hit sooner or later.
A train derailment in Delta has some people living near the tracks again asking for them to be moved. Plus,
this is an NDP police service.
Surrey's mayor announces a constitutional challenge over switching police forces. Will it work? And punishing water wasters. We'll tell you how much local cities fined people who defied watering restrictions during our unprecedented drought. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. A derailed train has been clogging up the tracks in Metro Vancouver. The railway company says no hazardous materials were spilled, but people who live along the corridor say it is a wake-up call. And as John Hernandez shows us, it's reignited calls to move the tracks.
A BNSF railway train went down on Sunday in Delta near Highway 1. The company confirmed it spilled some fuel. By Monday afternoon, crews were still working to clear the tracks with the hopes of having them back online by Tuesday morning.
That could have probably happened anywhere, right? So, and anywhere being along the bay or next to the homes.
Eric Seitz lives along the same train tracks which run through Crescent Beach and White Rock. He's counted a dozen BNSF trains that have broken down in the area since 2014, blocking community roads. He wonders what might happen if a similar derailment happened here.
It could have an, terrible impact on the bay.
Seitz has been involved in past campaigns calling for this rail line to be relocated, saying it's outdated while also running through densely populated areas.
You've got way more people, way more trains. It's particles in a jar. Something's going to hit sooner or later.
They are very vulnerable, and the area is prone to landslides.
This transportation consultant says many of the trains that run through the area carry chlorine and other hazardous chemicals. She says proposed rail realignments could actually make the route shorter and move it away from densely populated areas.
Do you really want that going through the community when there is an alternative that is cost effective in light of the disaster that could happen?
Despite years of campaigning, both BC and Ottawa have shown little interest. Advocates say the window to act is closing.
You need to start putting that on the horizon, and now would be a good time before, say you build casinos and housing and whatever along those few remaining places that would allow for a much more larger and efficient trail route to exist.
For now, residents call this latest derailment a wake-up call as this campaign looks to get back on track. John Hernandez, CBC News, White Rock.
The city of Surrey has stepped up its legal fight against the provincial government over policing. The mayor says they are expanding their Supreme Court challenge to stop a transition to a municipal police force. But as Justin McElroy reports, Surrey's argument might be less about the law and more about politics.
Is the 5-year-long controversy over who will police Surrey going away anytime soon? No.
My team and I have been clear. We oppose this transition and will do everything within reason to stop it.
That is Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke announcing the city will continue its legal fight against the province to try and keep the RCMP. And she framed it as a matter of city rights.
This government does not have the right to run roughshod on every local government that doesn't bend to their will.
Except they sort of do. Here is a constitution. It's been very clear on this in Canada and always has been. Provinces are in charge of municipalities, which functionally means so long as they don't contradict their own laws or break federal laws, provinces can do almost whatever they want. It's why political scientists who aren't affiliated with either side of this dispute generally have a dim view of Locke's challenge.
From a political perspective, they should expect not very much from the court.
The effort to try and argue against provincial sovereignty over municipal institutions is a really challenging one to make.
But maybe the argument Locke is making isn't constitutional. Maybe it's focused on something else, especially when you consider her comments today.
Stop the NDP police service. This is an NDP police service. This is an NDP tax on Surrey.
Which may end up being good political arguments, but whether it's a strong enough legal one is another question. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Victoria city councillor is under fire after her name appeared on a controversial letter surrounding the attack on Israel on October 7th. The letter in question asks for Canadian politicians to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. It is also critical of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, claiming he, quote, repeated unverified accusations that Palestinians were guilty of sexual violence. Victoria councillor Susan Kim's name appears on that letter. BC's Municipal Affairs Minister says Kim ought to say sorry.
I believe in survivors. I believe in their first-hand accounts, and it is absolutely wrong to deny that these accounts happen. In this situation, I believe it is important for Councillor Kim to come forward and provide some comments and, of course, apologize immediately.
Now, in a statement posted on Instagram tonight, Kim said she believes all survivors of sexual assault. She said she would be more attentive of her community before adopting positions in her role as councillor, and she apologized for how the letter took away from her work in the city. BC United leader Kevin Falcon is calling for Kim to step down. The BC government has now tabled legislation for ride-hailing and food delivery drivers, which we told you about last week. If passed, the bill would see gig workers treated as employees under the Employment Standards Act and Workers' Compensation Act. The government says workers should make $20 an hour, a wage 20% higher than minimum. BC also wants to make gig workers eligible for workers' compensation and stop companies from withholding tips.
We as province are establishing basic minimum standards for these workers, and we will have them implemented, and we will monitor them going forward next 6 months, a year, to see if it has the desired impact, to make sure that the basic minimum standards are enjoyed by these workers.
It's not yet clear when the bill, would become law. Police school liaison officers may soon be coming to Vancouver elementary schools. Parents received a letter last week which says police officers may be invited to take part in school events, give presentations, or ensure school safety. The letter notes officers will be wearing more casual uniforms, driving unmarked vehicles, and have less visible guns. The letter says parents can opt their children out of the program, but some are worried about what that means.
Got various parents that think it should be an opt-in situation.
Right.
So instead of putting the onus on parents to opt out and the consequential effect on children, like if there are a small group of opt-out children, and, you know, one of the things that was foreshadowed in the letter was visiting school events.
Right.
Are those children excluded then from the school event?
Maloney says parents are waiting to hear more, such as how often officers will be on school grounds, the content that will be taught, and the ramifications of opting their children out. Perhaps you saw it in the water yesterday. A barge broke loose from its mooring buoy in English Bay yesterday, sparking a bit of deja vu. You'll remember almost 2 years ago, to the day, another barge got stuck along the seawall near Sunset Beach, prompting the park board to install the cheeky barge chilling beach sign. Well, this time, and this is from yesterday, a crew from the Canadian Coast Guard arrived just in time to stop the blue barge from running aground on Sunset Beach. A commercial tug had to be called in to bring it back to a secure mooring in Vancouver Harbour. Ralmax, the company that owns this barge, says it's looking into what happened. As more rain falls across the south coast, watering restrictions in Metro Vancouver have eased. But when the rules were in place, how did cities and towns tackle water wasters? Chad Pawson has a close look at the numbers and how different municipalities treated those breaking the rules.
This past summer in BC saw unprecedented drought. Along with asking residents to conserve water, municipalities also enforced watering restrictions with warnings and fines. And now we have a sense of just how many were issued. Bylaw officers in Metro Vancouver issued a total of $166,000 in fines for water restriction violations over just a 10-week period from August to mid-October. Now, the amounts of the fines range from $100 to $500 each. Vancouver handed out the most, Vancouver handed out 168 fines worth $500 each. Those were reduced to $250 if the property owner paid within 2 weeks. Coquitlam was second. It handed out 154 fines worth $250, while North Vancouver was third with 109 fines worth $200. Now, some smaller Metro Vancouver municipalities did not issue any fines, saying they lacked the resources to actually enforce the restrictions. When it comes to warnings, bylaw officers handed out more than 1,000 of those. Some cities like Burnaby actually chose education over fines. They handed out about 300 warnings and saying that an escalation was rarely needed, such as a fine, to have property owners change their water use habits. The penalties and the warnings illustrate the extent cities went to have residents conserve water during a period of unprecedented drought in the region, as well as the hundreds of property owners who actually defied the request to help mitigate the crisis. Even though BC's South Coast is seen as water-rich, local, regional, and provincial officials want people to rethink their water use habits as increasingly dry summers and wildfires stretch supply. On average, each person in Metro Vancouver uses around 400 liters of water per day. That's per person. Academics argue fines over water use are not worth the effort. A better system, they say, is to install water meters for every property in the region and charge residents bulk rates for the amount of water they use. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
A strike at the Rogers Sugar Refinery in Vancouver is taking some of the sweetness out of this holiday season. Job action at one of the country's few sugar processing facilities is now stretching into a 7th week. And as Janella Hamilton tells us, some small businesses are feeling a bitter strain.
Pastry chef Tanya Muller owns Legato Bake Shop in Vancouver. She says she's already struggling to find the sugar she needs to fulfill orders ahead of the busy holiday season.
We started getting shorted drastically on our sugar, and we've been trying to just basically search over town, just going to Costco and things early in the morning, trying to find sugar wherever we can.
Muller estimates she needs at least 8 to 10 big bags of white and brown sugar each week. But due to the strike, her wholesaler is now only able to supply 2 bags, and they're more expensive.
We're seeing a 15% increase on those bags of sugar, which is at a time where food costs are already at like an all-time high.
She worries she may have to cut back production, and she's not the only one. The strike is dragging into the busiest time of the year when bakeries and sweet shops bring in a majority of their yearly revenue.
If they're not able to produce the volume that they expected to, it is going to impact them, and we may see a few small bakeries have to close.
I personally have a CBC loan that's coming due in January that I have to pay back, so I was hoping on, Christmas, relying on additional income.
Another hurdle small business owners are having to jump over after a big profit setback triggered by the pandemic.
Here we've had like our yellow sugar, which has been by far like the hardest for me to get.
The strike's impact is being felt across Western Canada.
We were in Ottawa last week, and we let the ministers know what was going on, and we'll make sure that our bakers get the support that they need.
The union representing the 138 striking refinery workers says it is at odds with Rogers Sugar over issues like wages, benefits, and the company's proposal to ramp up operations to run 24/7.
It's that work-life balance and, having people work these long hours and spending more time at work than you are with your family.
Rogers Sugar says the Vancouver refinery has continued to operate at a reduced level, but acknowledges an impact on supply. Each day the labor dispute drags on is another day of uncertainty. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver Canucks fans in the stands and on TV got a bit of a surprise tonight when some well-known Royals dropped by.
We are thrilled to welcome Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, founder and patron of the Invictus Games Foundation.
Prince Harry dropped the ceremonial puck before the Canucks game against the San Jose Sharks at Rogers Arena. Then he and wife Meghan Markle joined the Premier and Indigenous leaders to watch the Canucks win 3-1. Harry has made several trips to Vancouver in the last several months in the lead up to the 2025 Invictus Games. That's the global multi-sport event for wounded, injured, and sick service men and women. Rogers Arena will host the closing ceremony. The last royal to drop a puck at a Canucks game was Harry's mother, Queen Elizabeth, in 2002. Well, we know BC is bear country, and a video has surfaced of a group of people doing exactly what they should not do when encountering the wild animal in Campbell River. This is from the summer, but only recently came to light. Have a look. There's a bear near the water, enjoying a meal, while members of this group crouch down beside it, within clawing distance, to snap some photos, maybe a selfie or two. Although the animal appears indifferent, experts warn that could change very quickly.
The action that we would suggest people take there is to back away from that space and, just give that bear space and time to finish its meal.
This group did not do that. In fact, one person, wait for it, tried to pet the bear before onlookers on the bridge yelled at him to leave it alone. BC Conservation says it doesn't appear the people fed the bear, which would have been an offense, but they note they're very lucky to escape unhurt.
And both sit in your stomach, causing indigestion overnight, and also increased heartburn, which we know is a recipe for bad sleep.
Coming up, our regular family doctor, Dr. Lem, weighs in on what we eat and when and how it impacts our sleep. Stick around. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream tonight. Tiny homes have been popping up at homeless encampments in Prince George recently. With winter weather setting in around that city, volunteer builders say there is no time to waste. But as Kate Partridge shows us, they're facing roadblocks.
Volunteers are working in snow and gusting winds to finish up shelters for residents of Prince George's Moccasin Flats encampment. Brad Gustafson is a volunteer and a contractor by trade. He's designed the shelters, tall enough to stand in and small enough to heat.
They're 8 feet wide by 8 feet deep, or 8 feet long, with a slight slope to it, and with a tin roof. And they just are big enough for 2 people to have a bed in.
Mayor Simon Yu campaigned on building emergency shelters for the unhoused. He told CBC News it's been harder than he thought.
The problem on the street, that for the scale of it, we have not facing it as a society together for a long time.
And then last week, the city of Prince George issued notices saying building and occupying these structures is illegal. Nikita Tiji has spent winters in a tent before. This year, she's in one of these tiny homes with her partner.
It's better. It's a lot better than a tent, for sure. People are gonna freeze out here, man. Like, they should be getting us lumber and stuff.
The city told CBC News there are no plans to enforce the orders, and volunteers say they aren't stopping. Gustafson says there is still a wait list of about 60 people hoping for shelter this winter. Kate Partridge, CBC News, Prince George.
We all know getting a good night's sleep is pivotal, to say the least. Many things depend on our ability to rest and impact it, including what we eat and when. Here to tell us why late-night snacking can be not so great for your health and sleep is Vancouver family doctor Melissa Lem. Doctor, thanks for being here.
Great to be back.
So, between you and I, do you have a late-night snack guilty pleasure?
Sometimes I do stay up late, even though I try to practice what I preach and get good sleep. But when I stay up late, I usually start with something that's well-intentioned, like a cup of herbal tea, but then it devolves into whatever I can find. I become an opportunistic feeder, like handfuls of cereal, chocolate chips, peanut butter, whatever's easy and accessible is what I tend to eat.
Yeah, and I will fully admit that given working late nights, you come home, a little cracker and cheese on occasion, and maybe some candy as well. So how does poor nutrition while we're awake impact us when we're just about to go to bed as well?
Well, if you think about what you eat during the day, certainly those effects can carry over into when you're sleeping. And one big culprit, as we all know, is caffeine. It's a central nervous system stimulant, so when you drink it before bedtime, it does exactly the opposite thing that you want to be doing. In general, it's recommended that you don't drink any caffeine before 6 hours before bedtime, and longer if you're especially sensitive. And then alcohol is another one that's less intuitive because sometimes it can help you fall asleep, but unfortunately its central nervous system depressant effect wears off in the middle of the night, meaning the second half of the night gets a lot more fitful. And then last but not least, fatty foods and spicy foods. This can both sit in your stomach, causing indigestion overnight, and also increase heartburn, which we know is a recipe for bad sleep.
But they're so good. So we know what we're not supposed to eat before bed, and you've made those recommendations. What are some of the foods we ought to indulge in before so we sleep better?
A general category of food is, in fact, complex carbohydrates, like a bowl of oatmeal, or you said you eat crackers and cheese, so whole grain crackers or toast, because that releases serotonin in our brains that relaxes us and also helps us fall asleep. And also the fiber in the complex carbs keeps your sugar levels constant overnight, so you don't get a crash that causes sleep problems. But the best evidence is actually for a general overall healthy diet, like the Mediterranean diet, rich in vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and lean protein, because that overall promotes more restorative sleep and less insomnia.
So, and when we talk about, we often think of our health in 3 or 4 ways, diet, sleep, and exercise. How are all of those interconnected?
These can all become a vicious cycle or a positive cycle. So for example, if you eat unhealthily, this causes worse sleep, which can change the way your brain processes and in fact make you want to crave more junk food and more food in general. And then you're tired, you don't want to exercise, so this becomes a bad issue. But if you eat healthily, then you sleep better. You've got more energy and motivation to exercise. We know that diet, exercise, and sleep are foundations of a healthy lifestyle, so we really need to be prioritizing all 3 of them.
Dr. Melissa Lem, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Good suggestions for a late night snack.
Thanks, Dan.
There's a live shot of a not too bustling Georgia Viaduct in Science World. We're due for some showers on the south coast tomorrow, but the rest of the week looking sunny. Darius Madavi will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
The blueberry harvest is over, but Peter Swinkles is still hard at work mowing his fields. He's been in the business for over 40 years, but it's only been in the past few that he's regularly lost crops to extreme weather. There are also new weeds, insects, and fungi to contend with.
Climate change is a reality, and it's thrown a big wrench into the challenges of producing a wild blueberry crop.
Those challenges are too much for any one grower to solve alone. That's where scientists come in. Nova Scotia is home to a wild blueberry research centre. David Percival is the lead researcher. He says climate change is proving to be a double-edged sword for blueberries.
There's some good ones right there. Just a little bit of an increase in temperature, so 1 to 2 degrees increase, has resulted in our growing season becoming substantially longer. On the negative side, unfortunately, we've had some pest issues surface that have become really, really challenging.
Percival is working with microorganisms that can be used as an alternative to chemical sprays for these new pests. He's also helping farmers use drones to get highly detailed information about their fields.
As you can see behind us, you have these various shades, and each of these units is what we refer to as a clone. So it's quite a diverse population. And so we're mapping that with the use of the drones, getting an idea of what's located where, and in particular, along with that, what's susceptible, what needs a little bit extra care.
Percival's research center may be small, but growers say it has a big impact.
The big advantage that we have from research is they've given me extra tools in my toolbox to be able to propagate this type of crop.
With new tools for a new climate reality, local blueberries have a chance to continue growing. Taryn Grant, CBC News, Burritt.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. On December 1st, join us for CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day for a special day of broadcasts. The event is a yearly tradition for many, and we're bringing you a new edition of CBC's Food Bank Day that you can watch and stream live on CBC Gem and cbc.ca/BC. Make the season kind and donate at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Our province-wide weather forecast now with Darius Madavi, and you've got some warnings you're keeping an eye on.
Yes, now you might notice a little bit less color on here than we had before. That's because as those winds calmed in the last few hours, we're no longer seeing as severe winds here on the north coast and for Haida Gwaii. And we've also seen some snow warnings that we had earlier today for Dease Lake and the surrounding mountains in the northwest. Those have also dropped because most of the snow has fallen there. Meanwhile, it is still pushing into the northeastern parts of the province. So around Fort Nelson, still expect some more snow to fall into the morning, meaning travel might be a little bit difficult, especially if you're moving around in that area. Considerable snowfall still coming, but if we take a look at our precipitation, the story will no longer be up here. There we go. By tomorrow, we see that snow still coming right now. But as this front continues to move further south, we're going to see on the south coast at different times, we're going to see at least a few hours of rainfall, but not too much more than that. Maybe a few more isolated showers popping up. So you can see here by tomorrow morning, we see that rain come to Tofino, and then a few hours later, it has passed and no longer is there by late afternoon. And then that is when we see it here starting on the lower mainland. And by the late evening, we do see that also pass here. And then we have some sunnier days ahead, not even any cloud and no precipitation. So it should be a pretty dry end to the week. In terms of accumulation, you can see that snow still building up in the northeast and down here along the coast for the mountain ranges, but most of it falling as rain when it makes it down here to the south coast, because we are looking pretty warm, just a little bit above seasonal right now here on the south coast, but we do have temperatures coming down, especially for the southern interior in the days ahead as a cold front makes its way further south. Now for tomorrow, expect to see that precipitation along the coast, those temperatures around seasonal, a little bit below, especially for the central coast, and for Dease Lake. And then here on the southern interior, we see that those sunny skies do continue. And here in Vancouver, we have that one day of rain tomorrow, and really it's just a few hours of rain, and then we see that clear up for a very sunny end to the week, and temperatures sticking around seasonal.
All right, Darius, thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
And that is your late news for Monday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Tanya Fletcher will be here for your news tomorrow night at 6 and at 11. So please join her. Good night.